Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to episode 201 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is your host, Jackson Mummy. I'm so glad to be with you. Hope that you're having a great study day and a great study week. And we are excited as we're getting closer and closer to the July 2018 bar exams. Now, as this episode releases, probably just under 50 days until your bar exam if you're taking the test in July. If this is your first time on the podcast with us, welcome. We're really glad you found us, and we're excited to have you along for the ride and along for the journey. You can obtain the information in these podcasts in a number of different ways. If you'd like to watch the videos, we've got them up on our website. Just go to celebrationbarreview.com/ in this case, 201 for the episode number. So it's celebrationbarreview.com/201. You can find past episodes by just typing in the episode number, and you can also find an archive of all of our episodes going back to the very beginning of the podcast on our website if you just click on the podcast tab at the top of the page, and we've got all the show notes and information there as well. Now, if you prefer to listen to your podcast, you can do that as well. We're on Apple iTunes, on Spotify, and iHeartRadio. I think probably some other places too, but at least those three. And all you have to do is check it out. Just go in and find the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers, and all of our episodes are there as well. So however you like to get your podcasts, we've got it for you, and we've got you covered, and we're glad you're here. Now, as this episode is being released, we will have our June 2018 boot camp for photo readers in the books. It will be done, and we'll be sure to bring you up to date on that and tell you how it went. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot of information to share and some video and interviews and clips. We've got some great stuff planned for boot camp. So I'm really excited to be able to do that and to share it with you in the upcoming weeks. In today's episode, however, I'm taking a former boot camper who was with us back in December of 2017. Noelle took the Texas bar. It was her third try in Texas, but she had also taken a previous bar in another state and not been successful. And she came to our last boot camp looking to use photo reading and the various skills that we employ in her bar studies to be successful. And boy, was she. She raised her score by 33 points to pass the Texas bar. It's a fabulous story. You'll hear Noelle talking about photo reading, but also mind mapping, about the writing system that we employ at Celebration Bar Review, and just what the process was like for her, sort of the inner battles that she had to fight to be successful in this situation. And it is an incredible story. I think you're just going to love it. I know you're going to love Noelle. She's absolutely wonderful. And it's very exciting, and you can tell the enthusiasm when you start talking to her. So excited about this, a major accomplishment in her life. So stick around, we've got that interview coming up. Now, before we get to the interview, let me just let you know that this episode, as always, is sponsored by our free webinar. It's called How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. It's a look at the powerful, proven way to pass. We'll be offering this free webinar on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, that's 4 p.m. Pacific. And this live version of the webinar is really an opportunity for you to ask your questions. We do a Q&A at the end that I think you're going to really want to be part of. But it's also an opportunity to see some case studies and to find out specifically what successful students do in order to pass their bar. Now, you do need to register for this event, and you can do that if you're here on the video page by just scrolling down to the bottom of the page and clicking on the link, or you can go to celebrationbarreview.com/webinar and register there, or just by going to our homepage and you'll see the button there as well. Now, when you do go to register, you will also notice that there's another option for an on-demand version of the webinar. This allows you to watch at any time based on your schedule, whatever is more convenient for you. It's the same content, but of course there's no live Q&A. So what we do is we give you a chat box and you can type your questions in and they get forwarded to me directly and I will respond by email. So not quite the same as being there live, but pretty darn close. And it's great information and I hope you'll check that out. So whether you like the on-demand version or you'll want to be there on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, make sure you sign up. It's a very popular webinar and we don't want you to miss out on it. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about today before we get to the interview with Noelle. You recall that in the last couple of episodes, we've been talking about the California bar results in particular, and the very low pass rates and the ridiculously high scoring threshold that exists in California. And I've had a lot of comments and questions from people all around the country asking, how is the California bar scored and how does that compare to other states? I talk about it in slightly different terms than most people do, so I thought I'd just take a moment and break the scoring down for you just a little bit. And even if you're not a Cal bar taker, I think it'll help put into perspective a bit about what's going on in California. Now, in virtually every state in the country, and certainly in all the UBE states and major states around the country that aren't UBE, like Florida, Georgia, and Texas, we use essentially a 400-point scaled system to determine when how someone is done on the bar exam. 200 of those points are generally allocated to the multi-state exam and 200 to the state or written portion. Those percentages can vary. Going back a few years in California, it was 65% written, 35% MBE. Today it's 50-50 in California, as it is in most states. Texas does it a bit differently because they're Texas, but generally most states stay with that 50-50 allocation. Now, 400 points is not the score that you get, as most of you know. What happens is that your raw score is converted to a scaled score, and typically that scaled score is put on a 200-point scale so that across the country we have some degree of uniformity. Everyone can talk about where they did on a point total of 0 to 200. So of those 200 points, 50% are allocated typically to your multi-state scaled score and 50% to your written or state scaled score. So I want to explain a little bit about how the scoring is standardized across the country, generally speaking. Let's start with the uniform bar exam because I think this is a good example. What happens is that an applicant receives a score of 0 to 200 on their multi-state exam, scaled points, and then they receive a scaled score of 0 to 200 on the written portion. In the UBE, that's the essays and the performance test. Those two numbers are added together, put on a 400-point total. So if someone was absolutely perfect, they'd get a 400. Never seen one of those. And if they were awful, they'd get a 0. So it's 0 to 400. There is a passing number assigned in each jurisdiction in the UBE, and it varies from state to state. 5 or 6 states use a 260-point passing score. That's the lowest of the UBE scores. And it represents basically, on average, since it's a 50-50 weighting between the state and the written portion, it would require a 130 on each. Now, you might have a 140 on the multi-state and a 120 on the written part. You still pass. It's a 260. The idea is that it gives a common threshold number. So 260, and the number goes up. It goes up in, I think, into 274 maybe in Oregon, 273 in Arizona. I'm looking at my map of the country trying to figure out all those different numbers. But New York, which is obviously the biggest of the UBE jurisdictions, the passing score is 266. That's the same number in New Jersey and the District of Columbia. So 266 is a good number to keep in your mind. Now, if you're in a state like Florida, they essentially do the same thing. Their passing threshold is 136 on the multi-state plus 136 on the written portion, so a 272 combined. If you get a 272 combined or better, you pass. Again, you could have a higher score in one part versus the other, but the idea is that it's still a threshold. So if you were sitting for the bar exam in Missouri, you'd need a 260. If you were sitting for the bar exam in Florida, you'd need a 272. So we can compare the states that way. California, and this is where it gets a little tricky, California multiplies everything by 10. Now that's really just a way of taking things out to the 100th level. It's one more decimal point over, but it tends to make people think they've missed by a lot. I'll hear people saying, I failed by 250 points. Well, that's not actually true. Divide it by 10. You actually failed by 25 points, 25.0. If you failed by 251 points, it's 25.1, if that makes sense. So what happens is that you need a 1440 in California. Divided by 10, that's 144. And it's really the California Examiner's way of saying in a 50-50 allocation between multi-state and state, which is now what California has moved to, you need a scaled score of 144 on the multi-state, and you need a scaled score of 144 on the written portion. We add those two together, we get 288. we could say 2,880 divided by 2, 1,440. But the result is exactly the same. It's a 288. Now, the reason it's important to understand that scoring is that now you can put California's numbers in perspective. It's no longer 1,440 compared to a 136 in Florida and a 260 in Missouri. That's not what's going on. We can put them all on that same 400-point scale. And when we do that, what we see is that California now is at 288, the highest or second highest, I think, jurisdiction in the country with a passing score. That is the hardest score to hit. And as I've said elsewhere, if you compare New York and California, in New York a 266 would pass. On the same scale of 0 to 400, it takes 288 in California. Now, beyond the obvious point of why you have to be 22 points better to practice law in California, I think it's instructive to remember that when you're looking at your scores, if you are a California bar taker, and you see that you got a 1390, you would say, oh my gosh, I failed the exam by 50 points. No, you failed the exam by 5 points. That's really what happened. And it's important to keep that in mind because 50 points seems insurmountable, but 5 points, I think you could do that, right? And I think that's one of the things you have to get in your head, that it is possible to pass the California bar in spite of how difficult it is. That 288 number is a mountain to climb, but it can be done. And I've seen lots of students with 1440s, which is essentially a 144 on their multi-state, but then fall short in their written part. Or they get to the 1440 in the written part, but don't get there in the multi-state. So you need both of them. It's very difficult to overcome that high a hurdle if you don't get 144 on both sides of the exam. If you fall a point or two short, it's not the end of the world in terms of being able to make it up on the other part of the exam. But often people misinterpret and misunderstand these scores. Now, as I said, at one point in California, the balance was 65% written and 35% MBE. That's no longer the case, has not been the case since July of 2017. So when you're thinking about how to interpret the scores, it would be hard to allocate or evaluate California scores prior to 2017 to the rest of the country. But now we can do it relatively easily. And I think as that becomes clearer to people, it's going to become more obvious what's happening in California and that it's literally a quota. That 288 number is simply too high. It's too high to be reasonable. When every other state in the country is at least 10 or 20 or more points below, something's wrong. You don't have to be 28 points better to be a bar member in California than you do in Missouri or New Mexico or any number of other states. And I say that with great fondness and affection for California, but it just ain't so. So that's part of what's going on in the scoring. I think as you read and watch and hear what's being said in the legal press and the pundits, you're going to get a lot of bad information here. You're going to see and hear a lot that I think is misleading. We talked about that a couple of episodes ago, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but I just want everybody to be aware that we can now compare scores across jurisdictions. And we can now say with some certainty the UBE is the best exam to take. Regardless of where you're sitting for the exam, that 260 threshold is the lowest threshold in the country, and it's a reasonable threshold. It's not an easy one to reach. But as we go up from there, as we get to these higher thresholds in other states, it's pretty clear that we can still stay far below the number that we need for California. So you can be 270, 272, 266. Those are all states' numbers that would get you into the bar and I think make you pretty happy. It's really just this 288 in California that's a problem. So there you go, my primer on bar scoring in California. Thank you. You're welcome very much. Well, to happier things. We did this interview recently with a passing Celebration Bar Review student. Noelle had taken the Texas bar, as I say, a couple of times without success, but she kept working at it. She came to our boot camp. She employed all of the tools that we offer. You're going to hear her talk about those. And she ended up with a 33-point increase to pass the Texas bar easily. She just blew right past the passing score that she needed there, and she's going to tell you all about it. So let's jump into our interview with the successful Texas bar taker, Noelle Vinson. Well, hey everybody, welcome to Hanging Out with Successful Bar Exam Takers, and I have probably one of my all-time, like after 25 years, all-time favorite students that I get to talk to today. Hi Noelle, how are you?
Very well, Jackson.
Well, this is a big, big moment, one that you've been waiting for, I've been waiting for. You want to tell the world what you just did?
I passed the Texas bar exam, and I've been
Yay.
sworn in as an attorney.
Wow. This is no small accomplishment, folks. We've got a lot to unpack today because Noelle has had quite a journey to get here and had to do an extraordinary amount of work. And this is a great, great accomplishment. So let's start by you just telling folks a little bit about your background and how you got to school and what kind of led you into taking the Texas bar.
Yeah, so, well, after graduating from college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do next. I was either going to do something in education. I knew I really cared about education, so I was either going to do education law or education psychology. I wasn't really sure, and I thought I really care about social justice issues, so maybe I should go the law route. And so I applied to law school, and I got into law school, and I went to American University, and I had a wonderful experience there, and I got a chance to work in the Disability Rights Law Clinic and got to work on special education issues there. And after law school, I got married right away, and we had been dating for a long time, and that was wonderful. The timing was right in terms of that, but I'm not sure the timing was right in terms of taking the bar exam.
Right.
Um, so I went ahead and I took the Connecticut bar exam, and I just felt very kind of like scrambled during that whole process. And I remember thinking when I was about to submit my application to take it, I don't know if I should do this. I don't really know. I'm probably not going to live in Connecticut. So it was just kind of, everyone was taking the bar, and so I was like, I guess I'm supposed to do this. So I
Right.
did, and I didn't pass that time. Um, and I worked with another bar review company. Um, and it was a very, that experience, I felt like I didn't get very much guidance. I felt like nobody was really telling me where I should be. It seemed like my assignments were very cumbersome. I was trying to create my own outlines after reading their outlines and making flashcards, and I was just doing a lot, and it just seemed like there just wasn't enough time to do it all. And I remember asking for advice, and no one was really able to give me much advice. Eventually, someone sent me their outline, and I guess I was supposed to study that, but it didn't really mean that much to me because I didn't create it. And anyway, so that was that experience.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Texas, and I waited about a year. And took the Texas bar exam with another bar review company that I thought would be better because they said you could study on your own schedule. It was supposed to be tailored to you because you could study on your own schedule. That was helpful, but I still didn't get very much personal guidance. I spoke to someone on the phone a couple of times who sounded like they were also a recent law school graduate, and they didn't really have anything particular to tell me about what was going on with my studies. And they just said, keep going. I know it doesn't seem like you have a lot of time, but you do, and very general statements like that. So I did my best. I did the best I could, and I felt pretty good about the test that time. Um, but I ultimately didn't pass that time. So and before I found out I didn't pass, I had been surfing the web on Facebook, and I came across a Celebration Bar Review seminar and thought it sounded really interesting. So I listened to it, and Jackson was talking about various techniques and methods that he could use to help people pass the bar exam who hadn't been successful with traditional methods or regular methods that most people use. And it sounded really unique and interesting. He talked about knowing instead of memorizing, and he talked about different resources that he had. There were something called Paraliminals, there was something called PhotoReading. There were all these different resources that I had never heard about. So I decided I would keep that in my back pocket. I actually watched that before I knew my results. And so I just thought, at least I know that if something happens and I don't pass, right away I can get plugged into this resource. So I have it in my back pocket. So I ultimately needed it. And the very next day, I think I had, after I found out my negative results that time, I made an appointment with Jackson, and we just kind of went from there.
Yeah, and I remember when we first talked, and the two things happening. One was the enormous disappointment that you had failed, obviously, but also this really strong-willed determination that you could pass, that you knew in your heart of hearts you were capable of doing this. Now, you had some accommodations that you had to get, and some challenges. You went to a pretty good undergraduate school, Princeton, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know you're a really smart person, but at the same time, some of those time limits were really difficult for you, weren't they, on the bar? And so there was a whole series of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, the first time I took the bar exam, I didn't even finish it at all. I was rushing. I was like, okay, I just got to fill in these boxes. I just can't get through all these questions. I struggled to read through the whole question, especially some of the longer ones. I was wondering how people possibly get through this material in the time allotted. And actually, at that time, I did have extra time too, but I had never struggled with finishing tests like that in my life. It was very strange. So I didn't really know what to do because I hadn't had that issue before. I mean, I'd always had extended time. I was diagnosed with dyslexia from a young age, and so I had accommodations and different resources, and they'd always worked,
Yeah.
So I was very kind of confused about why this wasn't happening.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that because it helped form the approach that we took. When you came to me, one of the things that we did was to get you involved with photo reading, and I want you to talk about that in just a moment. But the other thing that I want to just point out, you took the Texas bar with us, and I know you've got a lot to say about that in terms of the first try, and you came up short. But instead of giving up, what you did was you put your head back down. We continued to build from that higher base that you developed. And it just took us a little longer to get you there so that you were able to pass. Is that a fair statement? That it was
Yes.
It was a longer road, but we were on the same path the whole time.
Yes. And I was able to adjust some things. I was able to enhance how I was applying the different resources like photo reading, and I was able to talk to other students like Andrew DeMasters. He spent some time talking to me about how he used photo reading, and I thought, oh wow, he used it differently from how I used it, and maybe I can try what he did. And I did, and I incorporated it. So what I did was I photo read more regularly and more frequently.
Yes.
I didn't just photo read a topic when it was assigned in the syllabus and then leave it and never look at it again until right before the test. I was constantly bringing out the books and photo reading, and it was kind of like a refresher. It was all getting into my mind, but without having to spend hours and hours.
Yeah. For those in our audience who aren't familiar with photo reading, can you describe it for them quickly?
Yeah, so photo reading is you pick up the book and there's several steps of it, but the most important one is called photo flipping, and you just flip through the pages. You look at it, you make sure you can see all four corners of the page, and you flip through page after page, and you might chant to yourself, relax, relax, 4, 3, 2, 1, as you're going through it. And it's really trying to put yourself in a state of relaxation so you can just absorb the information that you're looking at. And it was very helpful.
Yeah. How many times would you say you'd photo read an outline for a subject?
Oh, I mean, several times. I don't know, 40, 50, 60 times.
Yeah. And the reason for that is that you could take an outline that might have taken you 8 to 10 hours or more to read traditionally, correct? You were photo reading it in about 15 or 20 minutes, right? So the value of accumulated.
I mean, I was reading I could do a whole outline if it was a long outline in 3 to 5 minutes, but some of them were shorter, so it would be much shorter than that.
Even that, okay. And so photo reading was a big part of what you did, but another big part of what you did, and we're going to come back to your story. I'm just sort of wandering around here. A big part of what you did, particularly the second time around, was mind mapping, right? Can you talk a little bit about mind mapping?
Mind mapping was amazing. So I really incorporated that into my studies the second time. The first time you introduced it to me, but I didn't really get very familiar or comfortable with it. It felt like
Right.
more of a drain, and I was more caught up in figuring out the right way to do it, and it was taking me a long time. And so I ended up not using it really the first time. The second time I went to boot camp. I remember I had one or two conferences with you before boot camp, and you had said you wanted me to do mind mapping, and I thought, well, I tried that before, and I really didn't like it, and it just didn't work for me. So I'm like, I was feeling overwhelmed, to be honest. And then you told me that in boot camp I would be getting more instruction in mind mapping, and so I thought, okay, well, maybe after the boot camp this will be something that I do. But I was still kind of, I don't know, I didn't really know if it would work. So, but I did try it at boot camp. I gained a lot of confidence in my mind mapping at boot camp, and I ended up incorporating it fully into my studies for every single subject. So I would mind map after I had photo read an outline. I would do a general broad mind map, and then as I did practice questions, I would mind map them whether I was correct or incorrect. And then as I started to get more and more correct, I would just mind map the incorrect answers so that I would know the correct law, you know.
And you told me that you would read your mind maps to your husband, right? You would read them
Yes,
out
so
loud to him.
after I would make a mind map set for a subject, I would ask my husband to come over if he was willing, or um, sometimes I would just record myself if he wasn't available. And sometimes over Christmas, oh my gosh, that was another thing. This time I had to study over Christmas, and I was at my grandparents' house, and my family was there. So I would grab a relative and talk to them about a mind map. So
This is a
yeah.
dedicated person, folks. So, yeah, and nice family. So you did the mind maps and you did the photo reading. You also incorporated paraliminals. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Paraliminals, yeah. So the paraliminals, I used those to help to change my mindset, because after you've had negative experiences with this exam, which is a grueling exam, and in Texas it's actually like 3 days. So it's kind of hard to get your confidence back and get your groove back and feel like, yeah, I can do this. So I started listening to these paraliminals, which you put on your ears. You can actually sleep while you're listening to it, and it delivers messages to you about belief in yourself, anti-anxiety messages, things like that. So it starts to work on your subconscious so that you start to have different thoughts than what your mind might automatically revert to.
Yeah, so pretty powerful. Now, in addition to all of that, we taught you a different way to write essays. We used an approach called fact law application, which was very different than the issue spotting IRAC approach. Can you talk a little bit about what that difference was like for you in switching over?
It was so helpful. It made so much more sense than IRAC, which is what the other companies teach. It was much more, so for the bar exam, if you don't use a method like they teach in Celebration Bar Review, which is knowing instead of memorizing, it can be very overwhelming to try to memorize all of the law. But with fact law application, you are really focusing more on facts and arguments, and it allows the law to kind of surface to the top of your mind, and so then you're able to just pull out the law from your subconscious, basically. And it's just there, even though you didn't sit there memorizing flashcards about the law. And
so to be clear, you didn't memorize anything when you took the
No.
bar this time. You didn't set up flashcards. You were using your mind maps. You were photo reading. You were writing based on the arguments that were coming up. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's a completely
And I
different
had
approach.
always relied on flashcards for my whole entire life.
Yeah.
Ever since I first learned about flashcards in elementary school, I've been using flashcards, and they gave me great success up until now, and suddenly it just wasn't good enough. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you hit a wall with that for sure when you get to the bar exam. We're going to get back to your story in a minute, but because you employed all these different tools, I wanted to make sure we covered all of them. You mentioned boot camp. Boot camp was a live 2-day training that we do periodically, and you were able to attend that. Can you tell people a little bit about what that experience was like, if what it meant for you?
It was an amazing experience. Let me tell you. Okay, boot camp, we did a lot of substantive work. We did a lot of work on technique. Okay, it was great. But also at boot camp was a chance to meet other people in person who were going through the same thing that I was going through. And listen, Celebration Barbie has a great community on Facebook, and it's wonderful to be supportive there. But to have the chance to meet the people at the boot camp who you've been conversing with and on the Facebook group or in group coaching, it is amazing. And it was very encouraging and a wonderful opportunity. And yes, I gained a lot of substantive skills. That's when mind mapping really came to life for me. And I was able to confirm that my plan with the photo reading that I actually discussed with Andrew DeMasters was a good one at that boot camp. So, and I was
Yeah.
able to write essays there. And, Jackson was telling me, I see what you're doing. You're doing good work. You're working hard. You're on the right track. You can do this. And so, yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's a lot of fun because I get to actually meet students live and in person, and that's like the best. But then in your case, it was great for me to be able to see how you were actually working, be able to look over your shoulder and see what you were doing, and see that it was coming together. Because I think for you, a big part of the challenge was just coming to believe in yourself enough that you really could do it. When you've had success all your life and then you hit the wall of the bar exam, it's pretty demoralizing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. It can be very demoralizing, especially something, I've worked so hard, I've invested so much in it, and I have this dream of becoming a special education attorney, and I needed to do this. It was this hurdle that I had to overcome in order to achieve my goal. So
Yeah, and I know that you felt like your life was on hold while all this was happening, which was very
it
challenging.
definitely did. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So you're studying along. You take the Texas bar with us the first time in a fairly short period of time, and you made some improvements, but you didn't get quite over the hump. So we recalibrated, as you said. You talked to one of our former students, Andrew. And one of the great things about our course, I think, is that we have all of these folks that have been formerly in the course and successful who stay to help and mentor. I know you're already doing that for other people, which is so awesome. And so you kind of got yourself refocused, and you were in our premium course. So you and I were talking pretty frequently. I mean, we did probably between the two sessions, we did probably something like 30 to 40 conferences, right, to talk about your work. And, you just kept pounding away and pounding away and pounding away. And then one day, you sent me an email and you said, I had a semi fight with my husband, and he said, "Stop acting like a lawyer," or something like that. Am I right? Is that the
Oh
gist of
yeah,
it?
yeah. It was. Yes, he said, "You're acting like a lawyer" or something like that. You're right. He did, and uh, it was this weird thing because I was like, "What?" I was upset, but then I was also like, "Oh, he called me a lawyer."
I'm not mad now,
Yeah,
but we didn't know the results yet. But
yeah.
for
That's
you, it was an awakening moment that other people perceived you as being a lawyer, right?
yes, yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, and that's kind of a big deal. All right, so now with all of that background, all of these tools that Noelle used and put together, you now head back to the Texas bar exam for February 2018. Tell me a little bit about how that felt, what your mindset was, how you were going into the test.
Yeah, so February 2018, I definitely felt like I was on more solid ground because I knew for sure between the photo reading and the mind mapping, the information was definitely in there. I previously felt like, well, I don't know if I studied X subject or Y subject enough, but I knew that it was there. I just had to execute it. So I viewed my biggest challenge as getting enough rest because I had a sleep issue previously
Mhm.
that I didn't talk about, but I wasn't able to fall asleep before the exam.
Right.
So I was just like really excited. It wasn't so much nerves, but it was excitement. So I'm thinking like, how am I going to calm myself down? And so I did several things to help myself with sleep. Um, Over the course of months, like I had been working on this as well, like developing a bedtime routine.
Mm-hmm.
And um, it was very helpful. So I was able to sleep
That
before this.
helps. Yeah.
And so I had that, and then I felt like I was more prepared than ever in terms of substantive foundation. I knew the information was there, and I felt kind of sober, but I did have a little bit of nerves.
Mm-hmm.
I did, but it was a good feeling going into the exam. Jackson had me dress up for the test, which I didn't want to do, but I thought, okay, I'll finally do it. And I did get some questions about it when I was going to sit down, like, oh, wow, you dressed up for this test. And I was like, yes, my mentor told me to dress up. So I did.
Yeah, and the idea is simply you're
I
coming to
blamed it
work.
on you.
Yeah, that's okay. Throw me under the bus. But, I think it's pretty cool. But that's probably nothing compared to when you started photo reading on the exam, right?
Yeah, so I used photo reading during the exam. Now, I mean, I did ultimately slow down. There's different steps that you take, but you start out with the photo flipping through the test, and then you do read through each question regularly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you go through the questions more quickly. The photo reading and also picking answers intuitively using the intuitive method causes you to just read the question prompt and pick an answer. That's it. You don't spend a lot of time deliberating which one is it, I don't know, and you sit there and meanwhile time is going by. No, you just read it and then you pick and you move on to the next one, and you don't go back and change your answers.
And
So
how long did it take you to do 100 questions on the MBE?
well, I don't remember the exact time, but I know for sure that for the morning session, I finished 55 minutes early. The afternoon session, I slowed down a little bit. I think I was tired, even though I was able, since I finished 55 minutes early, I was able to take a 30-minute nap and have a relaxing lunch. I only finished 15 minutes early the second time, but look, I started this process not being able to finish this test at all. So that was a very big improvement.
Yeah, I would say for somebody with dyslexia that you could finish a section in 15 minutes early, much less 55 minutes early, is remarkable. And you passed the multi-state, huh?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there you go. All right. So what about the essay writing? I mean, it's a long day. It's the third day of the Texas exam. You got 12 essays. It's like, oh my gosh, these crazy people. 30 minutes each. But for you, it was a little bit longer day because of the accommodation. So you've really got an endurance test in some ways,
Yes,
right?
Sure.
Okay. So you come into
Definitely.
that third day of the test, and what's your mindset at that point?
I just gotta keep going, just gotta keep moving forward. I felt like essays were actually stronger for me than multiple choice, so I felt good about that. And I was just ready to go. I was ready to write. So
Did you have a sense that you could see the mind maps as you were writing, as you were getting to a topic and you would come up on something? Did you have a visual sense of it?
I didn't, I don't think while I was taking the test, but I remember during my studies having moments of thinking back to specific mind map and just kind of seeing how it branched off, and that helping me. So I know I had done that process and it was there, but I didn't so much visualize the mind maps during the test itself.
Okay, so during the writing itself, you're making arguments, and then the law is just coming to you, right? You're just typing what you think the law would have to be.
Right.
So when the test was all done, and you've got this very long waiting period, what was that like, waiting for results to come?
It's very hard. It was so hard. It's harder than the study process because you can't really do anything more. There's nothing more you can do. At one point, I know you're not going to like this, Jackson, but I took a couple weeks off from studying, and then I said, let me take 20 minutes every morning, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and just do some photo reading and do a couple of questions. And I think
Just
I
in
did that
case.
for 2 or 3 weeks, and
Yeah.
I think I only got 2 or 3 questions wrong during the span of that whole 2 or 3 weeks. So I was like, you know what? I think if I was performing at this level on the test, I was probably okay. So
Right.
that was a confidence booster. And then I think I had some relatives visit me, and my schedule got thrown off, and I was like, Jackson wouldn't want me studying anyway. I'm just going to wait for my test results now. I felt good about it. So
yeah, and I felt very confident that you were going to pass. You'd worked hard, you'd put in the effort. Your mind maps were absolutely spectacular. We used them as examples in some other webinars that we did. They were just that good. And the growth that I had seen from when you and I first met and we talked, and you were so frustrated and so scared and just sort of bewildered by the whole process, from that person to this very confident, talented, and just sort of secure in herself person going to the exam, which is why I wanted to ask about the test itself, because it was such a marked change. And I thought, wow, she's really got it. Well, results day comes. As always, Texas says they're going to release on one date and then they release early. Don't ask why, I don't know. But in any event, so my spidey sense said results are coming out, and lo and behold, they come out. Can you tell us how you found out about your results?
Well, normally I find out at the end of the day because I just ignore my emails and everything for the whole day. I think results are coming out. But this day, I decided to check my mail while I was still in bed. Before I got out of bed, I was like, okay, well, what if it's negative? Then I have to go through work all day. But what if it's positive? So I just checked my phone email, and I saw I got one email from the Texas Board of Law Examiners, and I thought, okay, this is different. In the past, I've gotten 2 emails from them on results day. So I said, okay, maybe this is good. So I pulled out my computer, and my computer took forever to boot up, and it kind of like, kind of saturated the moment because I was like getting excited, and then I'm like, oh gosh. So then I finally, everything pulled up. I was able to log into the website, and it said, congratulations, you passed. And then I was excited, and my husband's excited. We're crying, we're very happy. And I had to call my relatives before work, and it was just very exciting. I'm glad I did it that way.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? It's a great, it's a great experience. And and now you're sworn in, you're a member of the Texas Bar, which has just got to be like amazing feeling to have,
Feels
right?
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If I didn't go through this struggle, I don't know if I would appreciate it as much, because I just went to law school, and, I knew what I wanted to do, but, I always pretty much, accomplished what I set out to accomplish. So, I had done my undergraduate degree, and then I did a master's degree, and I just kind of did those things, and I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go to law school, and then I had this struggle, and people in law school were talking about, oh yeah, you're going to be an attorney, and I'm thinking, I really don't care about titles, like, I don't, whatever, okay, yeah, I'll be an attorney, fine. But now I really appreciate it, because I went through so much to just pass this test that I really feel proud of it now, and I don't think I would if I didn't go through this struggle.
Yeah, and just to put a fine point on it, the pass rate for repeat bar takers in Texas in February was somewhere like 15 to 20%. The overall pass rate for the exam was well under 50%. So you beat all of the odds. I mean, at every level, you beat the odds. And that is an extraordinary accomplishment. I mean, in a time when pass rates are falling like a rock, you swam against the tide. Now, I know that there are going to be, and congratulations for that, for sure.
Thank you.
I know that there are going to be a lot of people watching and listening who are going to be saying, well, I'm kind of in that same position. I mean, you only get a few tries at the Texas Bar, so you had that pressure working as well. But regardless of what state you're sitting in, if you failed the exam, it's pretty frustrating, and that's to put it mildly. What advice would you give somebody who's in that position right now? They've taken the bar maybe more than once, they've failed, and they're really frustrated about what to do next, what would you say to them?
I would say make sure that you really want to do it, because it's not something you want to put yourself through if you're not sure. It's a lot of work. But
Yeah.
if you decide that you really want to do it and you're determined to do it, you believe in yourself, you have to, I mean, I was very feeling discouraged, but I did know that ultimately I could do this. So you want to have some level of confidence, like if I get the right tools, I should be able to do this. There's no reason why I can't. If you feel that way, then you should find a resource that will provide you the type of instruction, and maybe it's a different type of instruction than what you've used in the past, and really do it all out and trust the person who's giving you those instructions. I would recommend Celebration Bar Review because they do things completely differently. They're not focusing on traditional memorization. They're focusing on your intuition and using that to get you through this exam. And it's so much information that I really do think that it's the best way to get through the exam. It's not as stressful. There is some stress, but it's not as stressful as the other method, which is traditional memorization.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people think that what we teach is this, hocus pocus woo stuff, but you worked really hard. I mean, it was not like you just kind of rolled over and said, "Oh yeah, we're going to take the bar." I mean, you really put in the effort, and you were working full time.
Yeah.
So there was a lot
And
going on in your life, right?
yeah, and some people really struggle with changing their way of doing things. I didn't think that I did, but I guess there were some ways in which I wasn't fully uh, taking on the suggestions, because there was so much room for improvement the next time around that I did it with you.
Yeah.
So you really do have to trust the people who are teaching you, and realize there might be a different way to do it than what you are aware of. Um, and you
Yeah.
have to be open to that.
Yeah, and I think you became increasingly open to it. You embraced it. You did the boot camp. You did photo reading. You did the Paraliminals. You took the mind mapping approach, and you used all those tools. And sometimes I think people assume that I'm going to buy the photo reading course, and then they never open the book. It's like, yeah, that doesn't work. So you actually did all of that, and you put yourself out there. And
Yes.
I just want to congratulate you on the accomplishment, because it really is extraordinary. I mean, this is not a gimme to pass the bar anymore. It's not something we just assume everyone's going to do. A lot of people don't. And you did it in spite of some extraordinary challenges. And really, I'm proud of you. Proud doesn't begin to tell you what I feel. You are, as I said at the beginning, one of my very favorite students of all the years that I've been doing this. And I think one of the reasons you're one of my favorites is because you just laid it all out there. I mean, you just went through it and did it. And you had some ups and you had some downs, but you kept plugging away. And to me, that's the mark of a really good member of the bar, is that determination and drive to succeed. You're going to be that way for your clients. I know that in special education law, where you've got clients who desperately need your help, and who the system doesn't particularly care for in this particular world, need good advocates. So you're going to be a great advocate. And I'm very excited to see what happens there. I'm really excited that you're sticking around to help our students in our Facebook group and in the group coaching calls and all. I've already heard from people that have said that you've reached out, and so we appreciate that a great deal.
Yeah,
It means a
of
lot to
course.
folks.
It's my pleasure. It's my
Yeah,
joy, and I definitely want to be encouragement to others. So,
yeah,
yeah, I love it.
that's great. Well, any final comments that you've got for folks? I know this interview is going to really resonate with a lot of people. They're going to be like, "Yeah, what she did, that's what I want to do."
Yeah. Well, just a couple other things that were really important to me. I had so much support in terms of family and friends who've been
Yeah,
diligently praying for me and encouraging me along the way, and I've appreciated it so much. And I think one of the things that allowed me to be quote unquote teachable is I was a figure skater growing up, and so
mhm,
I had the experience of being coached and having kind of like tough love and So that helped me to get.
Are you saying I was hard on you? Wait a minute. Are you saying I was hard on you? A little bit.
You were not hard on me, but you do give some criticism. You're honest, and so I was more able to take the constructive criticism maybe than some other people might be.
Yeah, you were definitely coachable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. So that's good. Yeah. Anything else? I couldn't let that go unremarked.
No, that's it. I'm very appreciative to Jackson and to everyone at Celebration Bar Review. I'm appreciative to my Heavenly Father, the Lord, who I believe directed me to you all, because that's what I needed. Yeah. And I think He knows all of my needs. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think your faith was a big, big part of this. It made you coachable and teachable, but it also gave you the encouragement and the understanding and the wisdom to know that it would be not in your time necessarily, but there was a plan for your life. And we're starting to see that plan unfold. So that's exciting. I have to say, I'm going to miss our conversations. You and I had a lot of calls.
I know.
It's kind of sad. But I look forward to other opportunities and other chances. I know you're coming to Orlando soon. Although I heard you're going to Universal, not Disney. So I don't know.
I love Harry Potter World, so I have to go there.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It is pretty cool. You got to take the train between the two parks. It's it's an amazing experience. So, but congratulations. It's just awesome to see what you've done and what you're going to do. And I so much appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I know it will be encouraging to so many people, and it will give them the hope and the belief that they can do it. And so we're very grateful for that. So,
thank you for the opportunity to share, and thank you for helping me with this hurdle in my life. So,
it's been our pleasure. We're glad to give you your life back. So with that, folks, we're going to sign off for now. We'll see you again on another episode. And for this episode, we're going to say bye-bye. Take care. Well, that's our message and our interview with Noelle. And isn't she great? I just loved talking with her. I loved working with her. I know she's going to be terrific as a member of the Texas Bar. And I think her story is so inspiring and so encouraging. So if you're taking the Texas Bar, or if you're taking any bar, and you're feeling a little down, a little discouraged at this point, that's a pretty normal thing. But I want you to know that there's hope and there's a way that you can move forward. And I invite you to join me on Thursday for our webinar, How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. You can register on our website at celebrationbarreview.com/webinar. Or if you're watching here on the video page, just scroll down. Or you can check out the show notes, and there's a link there as well. And then we'll see you Thursday at 7 Eastern, or you can schedule the on-demand version of the webinar. Well, that's it for this week. We'll see you again next week. We'll bring you an update on our June 2018 boot camp. We're excited. Hope it goes well. I'm sure it will. And we will talk to you next week as we head further along the extra mile towards your bar exam. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.